so improbable, the impossible has happened.
5 seconds left in the game. Do you believe in miracles? Yes! Unbelievable.
Oh, my goodness. Oh, wow! In your life have you seen anything like that?
Hey DJ, what's going on? I'm Chandler, and this is Tiger Beat Sports. Welcome to a special edition of this all-crazy sports newscast.
Hey everybody, I'm Chandler with Sports, and this is the Sport Report.
Chandler with Sports is how he wants to go. With is his middle name, Sports his last name.
We're tired of bias. It's everywhere you look. At the Sport Report, we report on sports with a
neutral, down the middle coverage
with an analytical spin.
We remove the bias so you can think about a team without any outside opinion.
No crazy points for attention. No power rankings.
No opinions.
Just sports.
We don't get paid $6.5 million a year to make stupid hot takes for attention. We also don't believe in clickbaiting you with outrageous or team-specific headlines. You decide how you want to view the game or team or the league. We're going to report on the facts without any bias. Hopefully the Orioles don't suspend us for that. We're out to change the game.
So let's get rolling.
Hit it, please. This is the Sport Report.
Here's CWS.
On the Sport Report today, we're joined by legendary broadcaster Verne Lundquist, voice of many of my childhood sports memories, including...
No good! By George, the dream is alive!
To talk about his career as the radio voice of the Cowboys, March Madness, and the Masters on CBS. Verne has covered nearly everything from Nancy Kerrigan and Lillehammer to the prayer at Jordan Hare to George Mason's improbable run. That's just to name a few of the many historical sports moments he's been blessed enough to call in his career. Now, Verne, I understand you just returned from a road trip with your wife, Nancy.
Just the two of us, I guess, that we haven't in years. So we had a great time.
That's awesome. 41 years, no kidding.
Yeah, huh?
Wow.
Yeah, we got married in 1982.
So I take it you were just starting at CBS your first time when you got married.
Yeah. I had been at ABC. I worked for an ABC affiliate in Dallas, and got a part-time opportunity with ABC from 74 to 82, and then I got the dreaded phone call. They said we're moving in a different direction. So it's a long story, but all of a sudden. I was 42 years old and had always aspired to be a network play-by-play guy. I never had any interest in studio, and the opportunity was gone. But I had friends who had moved from ABC to CBS, and that's the part of the long. It takes forever to tell you, but anyway, I had an opportunity to go with CBS initially for 8 college football telecasts and 2 basketball. That was my initial offer from CBS. But things went well, and all of a sudden those 10 events became 17 in the first year, and then the big thing for me was golf. In December of that year, 41 years ago, I got a call from Frank Shirkinian, the executive producer of our golf telecast. He kind of liked my work, and they asked if, have you ever done golf? And I said I did probably 10 total in the 8 years I was at ABC, and they said, well, we're going to try you on golf. And that turned everything around. Initially, it was 6 events, and those 6 became 17. And then within a year, I had a full-time offer.
Holy cow.
Yeah. It moved pretty quickly once it started moving.
Yeah, just kind of the doors kind of just opened up, I guess.
What's that?
The doors just kind of opened up, I guess.
Yeah, they did, and you know, it's and from that point, it's like anybody else's career or life. It's a roller coaster, and there were ups and downs. There were just incredible highs, but one of the big breaks, honest to God, was getting. I went to do college football, and I did college football for the first 2 years, and then Terry Bradshaw retired, and CBS said, well, we're going to put you with Terry and do the NFL. And we were quite deservedly that first year, which was 84. There were 7 CBS NFL broadcast teams, and we were number 7. And that's where we belonged. But things went well. We were together for 2 years, 84 and 85. And then the way television works, all of a sudden we weren't together. And Terry went off for 2 years, and he was working with Tim Ryan, who's one of our multi-purpose guys at CBS. He did a little bit of everything. And I was put with Pat Hayden the first year, the USC quarterback and now retired athletic director. And then I worked with Dick Vermeil for a year. And then we got a call from CBS, and they said, we're going to put you and Terry back together. And wouldn't you know, this is also typical of network television, we magically had improved. And so we went from number 7 to number 2. We were behind Pat Summerall and John Madden for the next 2 years. And we hadn't done anything differently, it's just perceptions had changed. I mean, it was that fast. All of a sudden we're doing a playoff game, which is a big deal in our craft. And we did 2, I think, and then Terry wanted to go to the studio. And in part because of frustration, he knew, we all knew, that as long as John Madden was the number 1 analyst, Terry was not going to be. And as a competitor, he thought, I want to do better than this. And so he and I were doing an appearance together at the NFL owners meeting in Florida. And on the way, he said, I think I'm going to call New York and ask them to put me in the studio, and I just want to get you a heads up. And I said, Terry, I think it's a smart thing. I've always felt like he goes down best when you can see him because he's so animated. And that part of his personality was hidden if you're an analyst in the booth. But when he's on camera, his gestures had more meaning. The impact of his words was greater. And, of course, he worked with Greg Gumbel for a few years and was an enormous hit immediately. And then Terry and a bunch of others joined the exodus to Fox in 94. I chose not to for a variety of reasons, and I chose to stay at CBS. I had an offer to go, but I just didn't feel in my heart that's a move I wanted to make, so I chose to stay where I was, and I've been there ever since.
Right. And what do you think you learned the most during your time in the 1980s at CBS? I mean, with Terry and growing through those early broadcasts on network television, what do you think you learned the most?
I had a dear friend who passed away. He was a CBS announcer, and young people like yourself don't know him. His name was Frank Gleber, and Frank was in those days, in the early days, CBS assigned announced teams to different NFL teams. So Frank was the Cowboys announcer, and he told me once, he worked for KRLD Radio as well in Dallas, was their sports director, and he said, don't ever, whatever they ask you to do, don't ever turn anything down. Just learn the rules, learn the etiquette, learn the language, and then watch videotape and borrow liberally, and pick up little things that you can apply. And my best example of Frank, and we were really close. He died at 51 while he was jogging on a fitness track in North Dallas. And the father of aerobics, a guy named Dr. Ken Cooper, that's where Frank was, and he had fluctuations in his weight all of his life, and he died at 51. But I remember Frank being assigned to the World Skiing Championships in R.A., Sweden, and I watched him, and he was terrific. You'd never know the guy couldn't ski, and he worked with Billy Kidd, who still lives here in Steamboat, and Billy has been our director of skis, retired now. But Billy and Frank did the World Downhill, and I thought Frank had been around the sport all his life. And that, to me, was always an example of a guy who learned to adapt. He learned the rules. I'm sure he did what I did early on, and that was watch videotape, and heck, we all borrow things. Some might call it stealing, but we kindly put a kind disposition on ourselves and say, I think I'll lift that. Just a technique. You learn how to insert stories, anecdotes. Our purpose, our job, I think, is to give the viewers a reason to be invested in the outcome of the game, to care about these people, and you do that with anecdotal information. That's the reason, and you gotta be pretty precise on when you put this anecdotal stuff in. You don't want to start a long anecdote when it's 3rd down and 2 at the 14-yard line. It's better suited for midfield, but you learn that by trial and error, and you give the people at home, and it can be good or bad. I'm a college football freak, much more so than the NFL. And, Saturday I was in my glory because we missed the first weekend of college football, but I hunkered down in our viewing area, in our entertainment room, and I watched from 10 in the morning until 10 at night. And I pay attention to the use by announcers of anecdotal information and how they insert those little things. And you want the people to care of, and as I said, it can be positive or negative. Now, the negative stuff you got to be pretty careful with. But I think anybody who cares about their craft knows that and will follow those rules.
Yeah, as a play-by-play broadcaster myself, it is tough at times when you're trying to figure out, at least at my young age, trying to figure out when to insert some stuff. It's challenging at times.
It sure is.
And
God forbid you start. I caught Chris Collinsworth last night. He started an anecdote, and then the play blew up. I don't know if it blew up or there was unexpected. There was a fumble and a turnover, and all of a sudden that opportunity for the anecdote really is gone. You've got so many bullets you can fire, and you can't be less than expeditious about it. You've got to be careful when you got to pick and choose when the appropriate time to insert that kind of stuff. Obviously for a play-by-play guy, down distance identification of players is the most important thing. But I think you give luster to the craft by the way you humanize in good or bad ways the players, and that's part of the joy, but it's also part of the challenge that we have if we choose to pursue this.
Right. And you, during your time as a play-by-play guy, you were down the middle. You never showed homerism. You were never a favoritism kind of guy. I applaud that about you. Even in your current phase of life, not calling any football games anymore, at least at the college level, do you ever step back and kind of root for those teams? I know you're a Texas guy by heart, but do you ever step back and start turning into a fan on the couch on a Saturday afternoon?
Yeah, I do now. I could never then. I'll share a little interesting story. When I did the Cowboy radio broadcast for 17 years, and that was really the launching pad for everything that's happened in my career since, because during the 70s, they became America's team, and the coach, Landry hated that term, but Texram loved it. And anyhow, they were high profile, and I was so close to those guys. We all grew old together, and Roger Staubach and I were close friends. And Mel Renfro and Calvin Hill, particularly, we were really close. And Calvin and Janet, his wife, Bob Hayes, and we all grew old together. And I had a guy call me one day, and he said, you get a little too personal with your play-by-play. And I said, what are you talking about? He said, well, you don't refer to Roger Staubach as Staubach, you call him Roger. And I said, I don't do that. He said, listen to a broadcast. And one of the most famous moments in Cowboy history, I did the radio call. And that was in the Super Bowl when Jackie Smith dropped a potential tying touchdown catch in the third quarter against Pittsburgh. And I'll be darned if I didn't say Roger back to pass. And I called he left his number, and I called the guy back, and I said, okay, that was on me, you're right. And I think that shows a familiarization that you shouldn't have. And I was in error in that occasion. But you learn. I don't think I've done it since. Well, I haven't done football now in 6 years. But I don't think I made that mistake again. I don't think so. And it's a tiny thing. It's kind of a picking of nits. But the guy was right, and he called me out on it, and he taught me something.
Jackie Smith was the loneliest man in America, wasn't it? Wasn't that one of your calls?
Sickest man.
Sickest man, yeah. I apologize.
He must be the sickest man. There's a background to that story.
It's 3rd down and 3, Dallas at the Pittsburgh 10. Roger back to throw, has a man open in the end zone, caught, touchdown, dropped in the end zone. Jackie Smith all by himself. Oh, bless his heart, he's got to be the sickest man in America.
I love telling the background of the story, so you'll understand. I think give you a little context of the call.
Please.
He was wide open, and Roger almost pulled the string on it. Roger didn't fire it as hard as he might have normally. But on Wednesday night before that Sunday game, we had just developed the ability. I was still working at as a sports director at the ABC affiliate in Dallas, and then doing the Cowboys on Sundays. And we had developed the ability to go live remotely. It was something brand new in 1979. And on Wednesday night of that week, prior to the Super Bowl game, I had Jackie Smith and his wife as guests on a 10 o'clock telecast. Now, he only played 1 year in Dallas. He had a brilliant Hall of Fame career in St. Louis, became a free agent, signed with the Cowboys. And during that conversation at our 10:25 sportscast back in Dallas from Fort Lauderdale, I asked him what the perfect ending to a career would be. And his words were to make a meaningful catch in a Cowboy victory. So when he dropped the ball, that's what came out from me. He must be the sickest man in America. And I was empathizing with him because I knew how much it meant to him. And at that point, I was thinking of Jackie Smith. I wasn't thinking about the game. And it came out. And Jackie has never come back to a Cowboy reunion since then. And that's been, 44 years ago. And he just felt like he had alienated himself from the fan base. I don't think that's true. I think people around the country felt empathy for him. Now, the other part of it, as the late Paul Harvey used to say, now the rest of the story. Roger Staubach told me later on, they had practiced that play on 3rd and goal from the 5-yard line in all week long, and they had that one play, a release to Jackie Smith. Well, Landry called the play, sent the play in. It was 3rd and goal from the 11. And Roger said later he tried to aim the ball. He pulled a little. He didn't drill it. He pulled a little bit off of it because Jackie was so wide open. But and that was Roger's way of explaining why he didn't just fire it as hard as he could. He aimed it, and it disrupted the timing a little bit. So Roger first of all blamed Landry for sending the play in the circumstance he was sent in, and then he blamed himself for not firing the ball as hard as he could. And it still gets replayed. It's one of the most memorable plays in Super Bowl history. There have been tons of others, of course, but in terms of Dallas, that one remains significant.
So I remember Jackie Smith way back in the day. I'm a Cowboys historian. I try to practice my play-by-play on games where I don't like the play-by-play broadcasters. I like Mike Tirico. Not saying that for that game. But there are some games where I'll just turn the TV off and just practice. But it is tough at times to be not a homer, but I have found the neutrality in it. That's actually why we created this company, this podcast, to be down the middle. There's too many opinions on TV nowadays. There's too many opinionated broadcasters. I'll actually mute the broadcasters, believe it or not, if I don't like them.
Yeah.
It's just not, it's a disgrace to the craft. It really is.
I used to do that when I was young, before I ever really got an opportunity. Certainly before I ever did the Cowboys, I would sit with a tape recorder, and in those days it was reel to reel, and I would watch games and practice. I think it's a very, very wise thing to do. Just learn your craft, rather. So I admire your doing that.
Thank you. I've kind of gotten a first-hand look and taste of what it is like to deal with the circus going on in Boulder. I guess we're going to talk about Boulder for just a second. What do you remember of Deion Sanders? I know you don't cover the NFL as much as you did college football, but do you have any lasting memories of Deion prime time?
Yeah, I do. He's a forceful personality, as we've all learned.
Yes.
The only real interaction I had with him was, years ago. He was playing with Atlanta, and they were doing a playoff game in Washington, D.C., and he was rooming with Andre Rison, who was a wide receiver out of Michigan State, and Deion and Andre missed the meeting with us. You hear guys on telecast all the time talking about, well, when we had the meeting on Friday, or when we had the meeting on Thursday. And you sit down, it's practice, it's absolutely mandatory. You always talk with the head coach, the two coordinators, and 4 or 5 of the players. That doesn't matter whether it's NFL or college. That's the routine. And we were at the hotel in Washington, D.C., suburban Washington. I was working with Dan Fouts. And Andre and Deion didn't show up. So late at night, about 8:30, not late, but later than we normally would, we went up to their room. They were roommates at the hotel, and we sat down, and there were 4 of us: Dan, myself, our producer, and our director, which is a normal contingent. And we got along, but I was a little upset that they had stiffed us and had decided, and it was the PR director for the Atlanta Falcons who said, Deion, Andre, you've got to meet with these guys. It's part of the league policy. And so it was an uncomfortable situation. But and then, have I interacted with him since? I don't know. I know I was present at the National Football Foundation dinner one year in New York City when he was elected to the College Football Hall of Fame. And he's one of the greatest athletes this country has ever produced. And but he's not known for his quiet personality, is he?
No, he is not. He is flamboyant.
Oh my gosh. And I love the ads he does with Nick Saban because he brings the what is it, Aflac, I think?
Yes, it is.
Yeah, he brings a little bit of Nick's personality. And Nick and I, now I don't know Dion well at all. It's my interaction with him has really been superficial. But doing 17 years in the NFL, the SEC, I got very close to Nick. And I know a part of Nick that I think, especially the local reporters, never get to see. And part of that is it comes through. The part that I like about Nick comes through in those commercials. Dion brings that out in him, I think. And so I enjoy when those things come on. I really do.
Speaking of Nick Saban, did you get to watch the Alabama-Texas game this past week?
Start to finish.
Oh, what'd you think of that? Analyze that for me a little bit if you can.
Well, it was funny, Chandler, because my wife went to the University of Texas, and I grew up in Austin. But when we started watching the game, my brother and his wife, who live in Austin, they're dear, very close to us, and they and their daughter, went to the game in Tuscaloosa. And ironically, Danny, my brother, his son-in-law graduated University of Alabama, so they were a mixed breed at that encounter. But initially, because of my ties to the SEC, we thought, well, should we be pulling for Alabama or Texas here? But then homegrown roots took over, and I was really happy. I know what that meant to the university. I know what it meant to Steve Sarkisian. I love what Quinn Ewers has done in terms of losing weight, getting in shape, losing the mullet, and so we watched the whole thing. I mean, we didn't miss a beat. And by the way, I think Chris Fowler and Kirk Herbstreit, they're both good friends, and I think they do an admirable job. I like listening to them. And anyway, we stayed with it all the way to the finish. And my brother and his wife, they just flew home yesterday from Birmingham. And I did so many games in Tuscaloosa that I'm drawn to them. I love the university. I really respect Nick. And Nick and I grew. I don't collect a lot of autograph pictures. I don't. But I've got one of Nick and me, the last game I did in Tuscaloosa. And he arranged it, and it's hanging on an office wall, just reflecting back on, I look at it every day, and I think back to doing the SEC was the single biggest thing that ever happened in my career. And I'm proud of the association we had for those 17 years. Gary Danielson and I are very, very, very close. We are as different as two people possibly could be. That's absolutely different. Matter of fact, Chandler, I'm sitting here, I'm at my computer in the office, and I'm looking out to share an anecdote with you.
Please.
We were doing a game in Tuscaloosa, and Gary was over, and he's very quiet, off the air, and reserved, and he really wants to do his homework up to the last minute. And he was over in the corner. It's a two-tiered booth at Alabama, and he was over in the right corner, and he had agreed to spend time with the Birmingham newspaper columnist, and the guy was interviewing. And in the meantime, while Gary's doing his notes, this is an hour and a half before the game starts, and I was stunned that he agreed to do this. But I'm up on the second level, and I'm glad handing, my work is done. I can't do anything more. I've memorized all the three deeps, and I've got the anecdotes in order. And so sports writers and columnists and ADs and school officials are coming in, and Gary looked back, and this quote appeared in the column. He said, "Look at him," talking about me. He said, "I'm over here worried sick about him and miss something. He's back there back there making nice with everybody. He said, I would no sooner do that than I would put an ice pick in my eye. Now, as weird as I'm telling you that, I'm looking down at an ice pick.
No kidding.
I'm picking it up right now. And on it says Verne and Gary, 2006, 2016. I keep it right in front of the computer.
Wow.
And Gary's birthday was yesterday. He turned 72. And we were in, I text him all the time, and he reads the text during the commercial breaks. He's not that busy, right? He should be, but, anyway, we are as different as two people could possibly be, but we're great friends. And we were together for 11 years. And he is as candid and hardworking, and believe me, he's not biased. People accuse him in the Southeast Conference, my God, open like we all are for a competitive football game, because that's what keeps the viewers involved. I felt for those guys last night, for Tirico and Collinsworth, when it got to be 40 zip. I know this. We went off. We left them. I said, that's enough of that. So, you could just hear television sets clicking all over America.
Right.
But Gary lives in Bonita Springs, Florida. His wife Christy, they've been married 50-some years. She was the daughter of the athletic director at Purdue, and he played at Purdue. Let me tell you something else about Gary Danielson. When he was a senior in high school in suburban Detroit, he was personally recruited by Woody Hayes at Ohio State, by Bear Bryant at Alabama, by Ara Parsegian at Notre Dame. I'm missing one. Bo Schembechler at Michigan. And he decided, because he was in love with Christy, he decided to go to Purdue. And he graduated from Purdue. But he was that highly thought of as a high school recruit that he had Bear Bryant in his living room. Now, that's something to be very proud of.
That's a story. Holy cow.
That's extraordinary.
You just don't hear those types of things anymore. You don't, with so many restrictions and so many regulations in place, it's very rare that you can have a college head coach, any college coach really, sitting in your living room trying to persuade you to go to their school. It's no longer like the olden days.
Yeah.
It's just very different. Speaking of the olden days, I do want to touch a little bit on your college basketball career. Can you talk about Grant Hill, with you called the Christian Laettner shot for CBS?
I did, yes.
And can you talk about his dad? Because a mutual contact of ours by the name of David Smale always talks about the story of Verne Lundquist calling a game where Calvin Hill passed the ball the day before, 2 days before before Grant Hill was born. Sorry.
Yeah.
The Cowboys won the game.
I'll share the story with you.
Please.
As I said, I was very, very close to Calvin and Janet. Grant was their only son, and Janet passed away last year. But Calvin and Janet and I we became quite close, and I became aware fairly early on, of Janet's pregnancy. So Calvin, I told him, when she does give birth, give me a call, because I was doing the 6 and 10 o'clock news sports at Channel 8 in Dallas. I said, when Janet gives birth, give me a call. I would like to announce the birth of your child on the 10 o'clock news. So Calvin called me Friday morning, October 5th, 1972, and he said she gave birth this morning to Grant Henry Hill. And Roger Staubach takes credit for naming Grant, by the way. Anyway, I announced it at 10 o'clock. Well, that Sunday afternoon, the Cowboys were playing Pittsburgh at Texas Stadium. And late in the fourth quarter, Coach Landry called a halfback pass, and Roger Staubach pitched it out to Calvin. He went right, pulled up, and threw a 50-yard pass, and hit a diving Ron Sellers in the end zone, and the Cowboys won 17-13 and beat Pittsburgh and Terry Bradshaw. And that's in the back of my mind. And now here we are, September 28, 1992, at the Spectrum in Philadelphia, and a guy named Sean Woods banked a shot over Christian Laettner with 2.1 seconds to go in the game. Duke called timeout, and in the huddle, and Grant told me this story later on. Krzyzewski said, "Grant, can you complete the pass?" Because he had failed to do so earlier in a game against Wake Forest. And Grant said, "Yes, sir." And he said, "Christian, can you catch the ball?" And Christian said, "Yeah, yes, sir." So I still think Rick Pitino goes to bed at night wishing maybe I should have guarded the inbound pass, but he didn't.
He never learned that while he was at Louisville either.
Oh, yeah. And so Calvin Grant threw a perfect pass, and he hit Laettner, and Laettner with 2.1 seconds had the presence of mind to know that he had time to dribble, fake to his right, come back to his left.
There's the pass to Laettner. Puts it up. Yes!
And he was perfect, 10 for 10 from the field, 10 for 10 from the free throw line, and he grabbed 7 rebounds. And when I was retelling, and I got time to tell this story on the air in the recap, I told the story of, at that point, 20 years prior, I had announced the birth of this little child, and here he was, a 6'8" sophomore, and played 19 years ultimately in the NBA, and is one of the brightest men I've ever met. He and Calvin both, and I told that story in the recap of after the game had been complete. There's all the celebration going on, and anyway, I told the story at a seminar in New York, and Grant said, "I didn't know about that." I said, "Grant, of course you did. Your mom has told you that." And he called his mom that night, and he saw me the next morning. He said, "You really did announce my birth on television." I said, "Did you think I was lying to you?" "No, of course I did." And so I haven't seen him now in 4 or 5 years. Now he's working with Bill and Jim Nance. Well, they did the last one last year, and Iron Eagle's going to take over this year.
Right.
But Grant Hill is one of the most exemplary human beings I know. And anyway, the other post statement, the after part of that is Mike Krzyzewski, instead of going over and doing the live shot on the Duke radio broadcast with Bob Harris as a play-by-play, there was a legendary broadcast in Kentucky named Kaywood Ledford. And he had announced before the season began that his 39th year at Kentucky, would be the final year if they won the national championship or whenever they lost. And so here Kentucky loses on this 18-foot jump shot from Christian. And instead of going to Bob Harris, Mike went on live with Kaywood Ledford to tell him thanks from the basketball community for all that he meant to the game that Mike loved and Kaywood Ledford loved. And I just love that story. Leslie Visser was our sideline reporter. And for the last 2 minutes of regulation and all of the overtime, she had been stationed about 20 feet away from Kaywood. We were going to throw it to her to tell the story of his long loyalty and love for the University of Kentucky. And she never got on the air. The game was just too compelling. So that one, and it's it has stood the test of time. I mean, that's 31 years ago.
Yeah.
And people still remember that game.
Well, that date is actually in my calendar every year. It's the Christian Laettner game. To this day, it is the greatest college basketball game of all time. And I'm sitting here. I interviewed Dan Gavitt, the head of March Madness, last week, and I forgot to ask him about Laettner. It was in my notes. and I forgot about it. So the next time I have him on, I'm gonna have to ask him about that, because that game I listen to it in its entirety every year for March Madness. It's one of the best times of the year, regardless. And you go back and listen to the commentary that you do. Were you with Rafferty for that game? Who were you with? Who's your color guy for that?
For that one, it was Lenny Elmore.
Lenny Elmore.
And there's a story there too, Chandler. Bill and I worked together. First time we ever worked together was 40 years ago, 1983. And we did back-to-back games in South Carolina, of all places. And the first one we had was much anticipated interregional matchup between the University of Idaho and South Carolina. I mean, people just were tuned, just couldn't tear their eyes off the game. And the next week, we had Marquette with this junior All-American guard named Doc Rivers at South Carolina. And Billy said, we got along so well the first night, why don't you bring Nancy and I'll bring Joni. And we did that second week, and we became fast friends, the four of us. We still are. And I talked to Bill 2 weeks ago, and we got calls from New York, and they said, "Gosh, you guys sound great together. You and Bill, you and Verne. Well, this is the nature of television too." The next time we worked together was 17 years later. No explanation. Just for 17 years, we didn't see each other. And then they put us back together in 2000, and we were together for 15 years. And I don't know, we certainly improved, I guess, in somebody's eyes. And he and Joni, wonderful. They have two homes. They live in, he's a member of Baltusrol in New Jersey, great golf course. Golf. And then they have a home in Jupiter, Florida. And I've got a million stories about Mr. Raftery, but he's a dear, dear friend.
He seems like a great man, and he is a fantastic color commentator.
Yep.
There is no question.
He's got all the little phrases. It's my favorite is onions.
Onions! Oh, I've heard that call so many times over the years.
Got it, yeah. And I have video, when I do speeches, I've got video of Bill. We did an Ohio State game against Siena, and it was 8 versus 9. So there was no particular decisive favorite going into the game. But a kid named Ron Moore hit a three-pointer, tied up with 2 seconds left to go. It was like Leitner's shot. And Billy said, "Onions," as we were going to commercial. Now we go to overtime. And Ohio State scores a go-ahead. They break the tie. They're up by 2. And Siena dribbles the ball. They go back to Ron Moore. And with time almost expired, he cans a 3, and they win the game by 1, to which Mr. Raftery responded, "Onions, double order."
Wait a second. If I remember correctly, and please correct me if I'm wrong, that was 2009. It was a first-round game, Dayton, Ohio. I believe he hit the shot from the same spot that he hit it at the first overtime. It was a very similar spot.
One more time?
So didn't Ron Moore hit that shot from almost the same spot that he hit it in the first overtime?
Yeah, you're right. You got a better memory than I do, because you're a lot younger.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, that's right.
Oh, gosh. 2009 was the year that
the game was in Dayton.
Yes, and I'm trying to remember for the life of me, they were in one region. They were in Louisville's region. That was the Midwest region. The Midwest Regional was played in Indianapolis later that next week, actually. Siena went and played Louisville. They lost to Louisville. Louisville was the number 1 overall seed, projected to win the national championship. Pitino was supposed to win a title at his second school. They ended up winning it 4 years later. They got knocked out by Michigan State in the Elite Eight, if I'm not mistaken.
I think you're right, yeah.
Gosh, I'm having a nostalgic type of day here.
Yeah.
Wow. Before I let you go here, and I appreciate you taking your time to spend time with us today. This is I've covered sports for 20 years. I've been a play-by-play broadcaster for parts of 15 years. This is probably the most informative conversation I've ever had.
Gosh.
Seriously, just the stories and things I'm learning, and even though I have my notes here, it's one of those things. I've got more pages on my notes from this conversation than I did starting this conversation.
I appreciate that.
You've been retired now. This upcoming year will be... How many years have you been at Augusta? 40 now?
It's 39. I'll do one more.
Okay.
Yeah, I retired from football in 2016, basketball in 2017, and my boss, Sean McManus, we had a very nice conversation, and he said, well, you've kind of got a history at Augusta. And I did the PGA for a number of years, but then we scaled that back. And so I've done 39 Masters, and we're going to do one more. That's next April. And then I think that 40 is a nice round number. Now, the funny thing about that is Jim Nance did his first in 1986.
Yes.
That was the year that Jack Nicklaus won. Yes, sir! And Jim was at 16. And I missed a couple of years. We had a regime change at CBS, and I was working. I took a hiatus and went for the money, and I went to Turner Broadcasting for 3 years. But I was still doing a lot of skating events at CBS. So in my mind, I was still an employee at CBS, but some members of our leadership team thought, no, he's with Turner now. So I missed 97 and 98, and then came back in 99. But so Sean and I have talked about it, and 40 is a nice number. Now Jim has 37 to 38. 38, I think.
I think he has 38. He did his first one in 83, is what I heard.
Yeah, he was at 16, and he had a great line when Nicklaus almost aced the 16th hole. Almost had a hole one. And Jim said, the bear has come out of hibernation. and then Jack took the lead at the 17th hole that year with a 12-foot putt. But Jim, I know what his intentions are, how long he wants to work. He's 63 now, I think, which seems impossible. But he wants to work till he's 75. So I'm going to hold the record here for 1 year, and then he's going to shoot by and set it out of sight. They said no one, all records need to be broken, but I don't think once Jim retire that anyone will ever approach his longevity. And in my view, Nance is the best golf host there's ever been. He's such a comfortable fit with that particular sport, and I think he does just a marvelous job. He loves the game. I don't know if he still is, but he was a 7 handicap and played at the University of Houston. Was a sweet mate of Freddie Couples, and I just think he's great at golf. Just absolutely great.
Now, he is one of the premier play-by-play broadcasters in any sport. I was listening to him at the Patriots game yesterday with Tony Romo. So, phenomenal stuff there. 40 years. I'm hoping, this is a long shot and a half, but I'm hoping to connect with you in person at Augusta next year.
Really?
Yes, and that is, of all the things we are trying to do here, that is the one thing I'm trying to do. Augusta is the one place on this earth that I said, by God, please, Lord, let me be at Augusta before I die.
I really hope you get it. It is, as you know, the toughest ticket in all of sports, in my view. It is also the best run golf tournament in the world. And I treasure the association I've had with it. It'll linger with me for the rest of my life. I mean, it's a great place, just an absolutely great place.
It is, and it's, on TV it does not do justice. I remember reading a story. You talk about going to the same place on the course every year on that Wednesday. They do a production meeting on Tuesday night, and then you go out on the course on a Wednesday and just stare at the beauty of Augusta National and just kind of regroup, and you have those moments of, I'm here. I get to experience this. Like, what were your first impressions of Augusta, being on the grounds at Augusta?
Well, my first hole that I ever worked was 13. Frank Turkinian had called me, and as I said a while ago in the conversation, that was the biggest break I got. Frank the Ayatollah, our executive producer, called and said, I like your work. So here are your assignments in golf the first year. We're going to put you at Pebble Beach, okay. You're going to do Memorial, Jack's Tournament. You're going to do the Byron Nelson and Colonial. And oh, by the way, you're going to work at Augusta. And just driving in the television entrance, the hallowed entrance, of course, is players and members down the Magnolia Lane. You don't do that if you're just hoi polloi like we are. So we have a television entrance that is it's entrance 10, I think. I can't remember right now. But we're away. Well, we used to be away from the we were down by the par 3 course. Now it's across the street. They've rebuilt they call it Content Center, and it is the most magnificent production facility you've ever seen in your life. But I remember driving on the golf cart, and I had the director was a fellow named Bob Daly then. He's long passed away. But Bob said, buddy boy, I've been here for a long time. Let me show you Augusta. And he put me in the golf cart. He drove, and we came up onto the course. The old entrance you would cross from the compound to, you'd come across, and your first view of the course was across the 11th fairway. So you cross the 11th fairway, and you look to your left, and down there is the 11th green, and the iconic par 3 12th, and you see the tee on 13. And so that was my first view ever.
Oh, my goodness. Oh, wow! In your life have you seen anything like that?
Of Augusta National. And I still treasure that memory of that first visit. And I have a picture. It's not here. We've got it. Nancy and I keep a copy in Austin. But Nance was with me that first year. And we have a picture enlarged that of Nancy and me on the 13th fairway. And I treasure, that was our first year. That was 1983. And boy, we together, and she'll go with me now for the last one in April of next year. And it'll be poignant, I'll guarantee you that, 40 of them.
Yeah, round numbers are good things to end on. And granted, we're all going to miss you. We already do. I turn my TV on every Saturday. Don't get me wrong. I love Brad Nessler. I love Gary. But I miss Uncle Verne. I mean, one of your last games doing March Madness was the Sweet 16 matchup, Chiozza. And do you remember that game? 2017, Florida, Wisconsin, Sweet 16 in New York?
Did I ever? Yeah. Well, how's this for perfect? My last game was a regional final in Madison Square Garden.
Yeah, and you got to call South Carolina beating Florida.
We had Florida and South Carolina in the regional final, and I came on the air and I said, I never thought I would ever say this again, but welcome to the SEC on CBS. And, and South Carolina won.
They did.
They won that game, went to Final Four. But, how blessed have I been? You talk about a perfect way to wind up a basketball career. And I was working with Bill.
sounds like it, and it sounds like you've had a very blessed career, one of those careers that people look at and say, that is something that I want to do. Those are places I want to be. You've definitely been an inspiration not only to myself, but to many other broadcasters out in this country and people that cover sports. And, we all have our influences. We don't idolize. That just wouldn't be the right thing to do. But we do look at you as one of those Mount Rushmore broadcasters.
Oh, gosh.
Seriously. I'm serious. I mean, you're up there with Chris Fowler. You're up there with Pat Summerall. You're up there with multiple... I mean, there's only 4 heads on Rushmore, so I've already covered 3.
Yeah.
I would have to think about that 4th one. I'm not going to lie. However...
I'll tell you, the best football announcer ever, and I'd gladly take a back seat to him, was Keith Jackson.
Okay, that's it. Keith Jackson. Nope, I was like, we're missing something.
Gosh. And we became good friends over the years. That's part of the wonderful aspect of this career too. Dick Enberg and I were really good friends when he came to CBS, and Dick is up there in
yes.
Mount Rushmore. He sure is. Dick and Mark. And Keith. I go way, 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 way back. And I don't know. Well, your awareness of the history of this craft is astounding.
Thank you.
But Ray Scott.
Yes.
Did the Green Bay Packers. And these are the days when I was talking about Frank Gleber, and Frank did the Cowboys. Well, Ray Scott did the Packers. And here again, I got to meet my idol. We became good friends. And he and Bonnie, his wife, used to come back. They vacation in Arizona every year, and then they'd stop here. And I do a golf tournament. Well, we started with Doak Walker, who was my idol, and we do a fundraising golf tournament here in Steamboat. And Ray didn't play golf, but he loved the people that would come to play in the tournament, Doak's friends and mine. And so he would stop and spend the night with us on his way back to Minneapolis. And I've got a picture with Ray Scott, and I treasure that as well.
Ray Scott, okay, so you mentioned he was the Packers broadcaster. And correct me if I'm wrong again, please. He was a great minimalist. He's one of those broadcasters that always said, be brief, lay it out.
Here's the most typical Ray Scott touchdown call you can ever get. Star, Dowler, touchdown. That was it.
That was it. It was similar to what Keith Jackson did in his final game at the Rose Bowl. Vince Young to the corner. He's got it. Touchdown.
You don't need to be superfluous.
No, and you've also talked about in the past of you just let the crowd erupt. Let the crowd speak. Don't interrupt them. You did a fantastic job of that. You laid out for when the kick 6, Alabama versus Auburn, the Iron Bowl in 2013. It might be worth another look, were the first words out of your mouth.
Yeah, that's right. Boy, you got a great memory. Yeah, that's exactly what I said.
I respect this craft. It is one of those things that, I really feel like I've been placed on this earth to do. So hopefully in the future I get to. Whether it be national or whether it be local, it doesn't matter. It is beautiful to be able to be a poet with the words, to be able to talk about the games, the sports, the people. I think that's the most important thing, the people. Because without the people, you don't have the sport.
Oh, yeah. Gosh, yes. Yeah.
And even, I feel bad we didn't get to talk about Lillehammer today. We didn't get to talk about, other stuff, but I'm sure we'll do this again at some point in time.
Yeah, we'll do it again.
Next time I'm in Steamboat, I'll let you know I owe you some lunch.
Okay.
But I hope to run into you very soon. That covers...
Okay, Chandler, I enjoyed it very much.
Thank you so much for your time today, Verne. It was truly a pleasure just learning from you and learning about the craft and the history behind a lot of these things that have happened in sports and how things are so interconnected. I just... blown away. That's just the best way to put it. So thank you.
Well, thank you so much.
I hope you have a wonderful and blessed rest of your week. We'll definitely be in touch soon.
Okay.
Thank you.
Got it.
Thank you, Verne.
Okay, Chandler, thank you.
This podcast is copyrighted by the Sport Report for viewers to understand sports from a neutral perspective and news reporting basis. Any other use of this podcast, the Sport Report logos, or anything associated with the company without the express written consent of Chandler with Sports is strictly prohibited.